Hi everyone, it's Usernamekate and welcome to the channel. Now, if you cast your mind back 7 months ago, you may remember that I introduced the Royal Enfield Himalayan 450 to you guys as a long-term loaner for the channel. Well, fast forward 7 months and 3,365 miles later, and I've formulated some opinions on this machine. Now I've managed to ride it on the road, I've managed to tour on it, and I've even taken it off-road. So, if you want to hear the good, the bad and the ugly, I suggest you pop your kettle on, I'll get the intro playing, and I'll see you on the other side. Right team, so I'm going to jump straight in and talk about the engine of this bike. So obviously, dramatic increase from the Himalayan 411, and it's definitely noticeable, and so it should be at double the power. So that is a good point. I mean, a lot of people that had the Himalayan 411s were happy with the slowness, you know, just the plod along nature, but there were a lot of other people that wouldn't consider it because it had around that 20 brake horsepower. So with 40 brake horsepower, I think it's definitely opening it up to more people. And I actually think that the bike rides really well. I feel like it's got enough power if you manage the gears correctly to nip around people and do the overtakes where you need to. One thing though I must say is I personally find this engine quite a buzzy and vibraty engine. And I feel a lot of vibes usually when I'm on the motorway doing, 70 mile an hour and with intolerance a little bit more, if you know what I'm saying. But yeah, very vibey, particularly through the pegs, even though they have got the little rubber inserts, I do still find it's quite vibey. So yeah, that would be a little bit of a negative for me, but overall, the engine pull for what it is, it's chugging along a lot of weight, is quite good. So one thing I want to touch on as well, the handling. Now, I made some incorrect judgment calls about this bike because one of the first things that I did when I got this bike was go on a 2,000 mile tour of the North Coast 500. I know it's North Coast 500, so you think 500 miles, but we've got to get there and we've got to get back, and just doing all the riding in between. It actually ended up being a 2,000 mile trip for me and my friend Georgie Romes. I do have a dedicated video on the North Coast 500 if you want to watch that. It was a cracking trip. Now, my luggage setup for that trip, I did want some panniers, but they weren't available with Royal Enfield and they couldn't kit me out with them in time. So instead, what I did was I got a roll bag and I put it on the rack along with my tent and I piled it high. And before the trip, I threw some Michelin Anarchy Adventures on because the channel is sponsored and supported by Michelin, so they were very, very keen to obviously put some Michelin rubber on the bike. So for the trip, as I mentioned, Michelin Anarchy Adventures, we checked the pressures, and the suspension is non-adjustable, so we couldn't do anything up front with that. But yeah, we made sure everything was as tour ready as it could be. But because the luggage was just piled so high, it really did affect the handling. And my dumbass didn't stop for a moment to think, could that be affecting the handling? I just thought, big 21-inch front, it's clearly not handling as well as some of the competitors on the market. And since then, I'd kind of dogged the Himalayans handling a little bit, and that was wrong of me. I shouldn't have, because on the next trip that I did, again to Scotland, Kielder Forest, wild camping, I had the panniers. And these panniers can actually fit a deceptive amount of stuff in there. So I only had to put on the rack quite a flat tent. And it made me realise that with the weight much lower down, the bike handles beautifully. It was actually a stark contrast from when it was piled high. And I definitely enjoyed my time riding this bike a bit more when the weight is a bit lower. Because the weight's quite high on this anyway, with the tank, around probably 200 kg, fully weighted with fuel and everything like that. So yeah, it's quite heavy, and the handling the second time round was much better. Keeping moving with my road impressions, I have to say one of the things that isn't a particular strong point on this bike is the front brake. I feel like because the bike is quite heavy and it is just a single disc and probably not the best caliper. I felt like you have to kind of throw an anchor out to get you to stop, and the brakes actually, especially if it rains, can be quite squeaky, which is a little bit annoying. But that back brake is actually quite keen and quite strong, so if you are riding this bike, you're probably best utilising that back brake to get you to stop adequately, because with just the front brake, it's not very good when it comes to stopping, I must admit. Suspension on the road, I personally haven't had any issues with it. As mentioned, the show suspension at the front is non-adjustable, but it's set so that when you do hit potholes, that 21-inch front just helps kind of crash into them and glide over them, which is good because it's not a jarring experience. And if anything, I'm quite light, so I would imagine that if you were a bit heavier, you might find that it is a bit more wallowy. But for me, because I'm not very heavy, I actually find the suspension on the road quite compliant and quite comfortable as well. So that's really, really nice. On the topic of comfort, seat, ergonomics, firstly, I just want to say, I personally find the standard seat, I haven't tried the rally seat, but this seat I find gloriously comfy. I can do hours and hours and hours touring in the saddle on this bike and not feel in any discomfort whatsoever. Sorry, it's a bit windy. The riding position as well, I really like kind of how wide the bars are. I like the screen, even though it's not the biggest screen on the earth. I feel like it does a great job of deflecting the wind and pushing it over me. But I am quite small, 5'4" individual, and I don't have the longest torso. I'm more leg than I am body, so do with that information what you will. But I just find it really, really nice. The leg position's great, the bar position's great. General comfort on the motorways, I feel like I can just go for miles and miles and miles. The only thing, like I say, that does cause me a bit of discomfort when touring is the vibrations that I do start to feel after a little bit, particularly on the pegs, but it's nothing a service station stop, I can't sort out, shake my limbs out and then crack on again. So yeah, comfort, great. There's nothing that I'd really change on that front. The dash, the TFT screen, I find it so useful. I really, really like it. I like how it looks. Bad road tester Kate, I didn't actually connect the app, the Royal Enfield app, to the bike and use the navigation that way, because I personally like to use a Google map with my phone, and that's made quite easy with the fact that this has a really nicely placed USB-C kind of port just there. So I can put my phone mount on and plug it in so that when I get to my destination, it's on 100% charge. And you know what, that's a bit of a godsend, because a lot of times you can be worrying that you're just draining your phone, especially when you're using maps. But that little charger is lovely, it's in quite a nice place, away from the rain. Definitely rate that. But yeah, really, really good. Mirrors, about as much use as tits on a fish. Sorry, Royal Enfield. They vibrate so much. The standard ones do anyway. We did swap the mirror. In fact, sometimes off-roading, the mirrors are completely off, or we'd just keep one. But the kind of aftermarket mirrors that we've kind of used for off-roading worked a little bit better. Still not the best, but yeah, these things vibrate like mad, and you can roughly see that something's behind you. You just don't know the depth or what it is, but you know that something is probably there. This bike doesn't come with cruise control. There are aftermarket kits available. We didn't fit one. I just get by with a little palm saver thing that looks like a Pringle, and it works quite nicely on this bike. If you are doing motorway riding, sometimes it's good to swizz it round out the way if you're on the country lanes, because the throttle, if you just press it, you can find yourself, shooting forward because you're applying that pressure on the little palm thing. But it works for me on this bike and does take a bit of fatigue out of the job, because you can just rest your hand on it, and that's real nice. Clutch, again, not a massively heavy clutch, but I don't tend to use it on my upshifts. I do a lot of clutchless upshifts, just kind of shut off for a second as I knock it up, but I do tend to go down the box with the clutch because I'm not an absolute animal. But yeah, I found it pretty good. I'm not like at the end of a day's riding because my hand's hurting, so that's good. Fuel tank, 17 litres. That's a good amount. It does wear its weight quite high up, and also we've actually got metal, so the bike is a bit heavier than the competitors out there with plastic tanks, but there is something nice about a metal tank. It feels good, it feels you know, it's got presence to it, and yeah, feels durable. So I'd probably say the least efficient ride that I did coming back from the North Coast 500 in a storm. I was freezing. I had all my heated stuff plugged in and I was still cold because it was just bonkers. And I was on it. I just wanted to get back. And I think I got about 170 miles when I was riding like that on the motorway. You do see that it tends to, with the fuel bar, the 2 bars take ages to go down, and then it goes down pretty fast after that. However, on the way back from the wild camp, I was not in a rush. I was just bimbling along, living my best life. Yeah, I was doing the speed limits, but I wasn't like in a rush to get up to them or anything like that. And I thought, how much can I eke out this tank? What range can I get? And I was on the motorway on the way back, and it was showing that I had 3 miles left and I was 5 miles from home. So I started to sweat a little bit, and then just kind of ended up chilling in the first lane of the motorway with the HGVs. And I wasn't far away from home, and Mike said if I broke down he would come and rescue me with a jerry can if I ran out of fuel. But that wasn't the case. After really nursing it back for that last little stretch on the motorway, I can confirm that I got a whopping 262 miles out of this tank. So it absolutely is possible, even if it means riding like an absolute fairy for the last bit of the journey. But yeah, so I saw like 170 to 262. Again, it just completely depends on how you ride it, how you kind of treat it, and what your goals are for the day. If you want to get somewhere fast, you're not going to get 262 miles. But if you're just chilling without a care in the world, it is achievable, as I found out. The bike is a little bit on the heavy side, which kind of does suck. And the reason that sucks is because of how slopey the stand is. It leans over so much, and you know, you can turn the bars to the right and kind of heave it up. Still a bit of an effort, but what I kind of figured worked for me was just, as I kind of threw my weight over, was just to put a load of weight on that peg in order to help it tip up a bit easier. So that's kind of how I got around it, but there's no denying that it is proper hefty, especially when you just put a full tank of fuel in it, to yoink it off the stand the best you can. And it's even more tiring if you're off-roading and you're on like slopes and you need to put the stand down and then it leans right far over. Oh, you've just got to really think about it a little bit more, because that's probably one of the least favourite things about this bike is that side stand. Yeah, so not amazing, that stand. But I do get it actually, because if it was teetering on the edge every time you put it on the stand and you're off-roading, it might be hard to put it on the stand without worrying about it falling off and, you know, tipping over. So I do get it, but just a compromise, a little bit of middle ground would have been great for this stand in my opinion. So we've covered kind of the touring aspect and the road riding of things. Let's talk about the off-roading. Now, I have dabbled a little bit in the off-road riding with this bike. We swapped the tyres out, we put the Michelin Anarchy Adventures to the side and put on some Michelin Anarchy Wilds, which are a 50-50 tyre, so you can legally go on the road with them, but they do have a few more chunky knobbles on them to tackle the mud and the stone and the gravel and the dirt just that little bit better than, say, an Anarchy Adventure, which is an 80-20 tyre. So off-roading, one of the things that I find great about this bike compared to a lot of other competitors that I have ridden, you know, I've ridden the Adventure R 390, the 390 Enduro R, I've ridden, what else, the CF Moto 450 NT, and one of the things that this has, which I really like, is quite soft suspension. Now that's great for novices like me because it's more inviting to just kind of glide over and just float over all the bumps. Whereas if you're somebody like Mike has ridden this off-road, and although he can put a shifting on this bike, that soft suspension is a bit of a negative when you're going a bit faster and you're pushing on, because you kind of lose that stability at high speed when you're going over the bumps, which isn't great. But then again, to caveat that, if you're like a super keen off-roader, I don't really think you're probably buying a Himalayan 450. Surely you would get something that is a bit more focused and a bit more set up for off-roading. Whereas with this bike, with a big old tank, you know, I feel like it's just designed really as a road bike to munch miles on, lightweight adventure, so go on adventure, go and do some touring, but also it would be capable of just, you know, beavering off onto a little gravel road and, you know, having a bit of fun there if you were getting to your next actual road location. So yeah, I wouldn't think it's a hardcore off-road bike, and I don't think it should be judged as one. Another limitation of this bike, which Mike found, because for me, if I come across a rut, I just paddle, waddle through it, whereas Mike is actually riding through the ruts pretty fast and pretty hard, and because the bike, the pegs are so low and the ground clearance isn't the best, Mike actually had an instance where he kind of caught his leg on a rut and it kind of ripped his leg around, and that's not the first time I've heard of that happening on a Himalayan 450, just because of the bike being like quite low and the pegs being quite low as well. They can be a bit snaggy if you are expecting it to do the kind of harder things. So on the topic of off-roading still, going back to my experience, it's lied down a few times, it's had a few naps, so there is that. But one thing that I can say, the lower crash bars, absolutely brilliant. They're just so good. They protect everything, they don't budge, they're hard as nails, and yeah, they're a bit scuffed now, but they serve the purpose and they did the job. For me, for the crashes that I've had off-road with this bike, the upper crash bars have been absolutely fine, but I have heard stories and reports of people crashing a little bit harder and having these kind of bend into the tank a little bit. Thankfully, that hasn't been my personal experience. Must try harder. But one thing that I would say that is a major weak point is the handguards if you are off-roading. I would definitely advise aftermarket, more hardcore handguards, because the handguard when I crashed kind of twisted a bit and it ended up meaning that I had no use of the brake lever. So I had to ride all the way back with just my back brake, including the road section, to get back to the van. So that wasn't really ideal, but you know, I'm going to take a big heavy thing off-road and going to drop it, and sometimes these things just happen. So yeah, I would definitely advise more heavy duty, that's the word, handguards for sure. So what would I say has surprised me the most about the Himalayan? Just how charming it is and how do everything it is. Like taking it up to Scotland, you know, there was not a bit of the journey where I was uncomfortable, where I felt horrible. You know, it was just pleasant and nice and upright. You know, it's better with the panniers, with the weight, but it's just a charming, pleasant bike to ride, and I just really enjoy getting out of the garage and going wherever I go on it, because it's just a nice, fun, you know, no expectations kind of ride. You just ride around and live your best life, and I really, really like that about the bike. It's very cutesy, very charming, very nice. One of the things, or the most annoying thing for me about the bike, as mentioned, is definitely that side stand. In fact, what I'm going to do is pop on the screen some footage I can find somewhere of me sitting on this bike as a 5'4" individual, 162 centimetres if you prefer that metric. My inside leg measurement is 29 inches, which is quite important in the grand scheme of seat heights. And that's 73.66 centimetres for those of you who prefer that metric. And yeah, I'll pop some imagery on the screen now, maybe even show you what it's like for me to sit on it if it's got the rally seat on. But yeah, as it stands, the seat is set in the 825mm setting. You can put it in an 845mm setting, just with like a bar under the seat, just adjust it that way. But yeah, it's in the low one for my little punk ass. And the weight is just definitely more of a downside for me with this bike, just because she's a beast. But yeah, I suppose the final question is it a bike that I would buy with my own money? Well, I think it's very well priced. Shut it, place. I would probably say yeah. I personally haven't experienced any reliability issues with the bike, and that is a big deal for me. Obviously, if you have a Royal Enfield Himalayan 450, please feel free to sound off in the comments what your experiences have been, because ultimately I have only put 3,365 miles on this bike. I would have loved to have put more on it, but in 7 months, as someone that has to ride a bajillion bikes for the job and, you know, rarely gets time to commit X amount of miles to certain bikes, I think I've done an alright job. But like I said, I haven't experienced any issues with the reliability of this bike. It's worn here, as you can probably see. That's with Mike's off-roading, because he did a lot more off-roading than I did, and kind of scuffed it there. But yeah, it's proven to be a super capable bike, and it's very much something that I would, you know, have happily in my garage if I was looking for a bike to do lots of touring on, lots of miles, and the odd bit of off-roading. Right team, what do you think about the Himalayan 450? Please let me know in the comments. I've tried to cover everything I can. If I've missed something, please do let me know and I will answer it in the comments. I do try and remember everything, but my brain is a little bit like a sieve at times, so I'm trying. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm really sad that my time with the Himalayan 450 is coming to an end. Absolutely gutted that they're going to take it away tomorrow. No, stay with me. But it is what it is, and I'm grateful that I was able to ride it for all those months. Alright team, I hope you've enjoyed this. I've enjoyed filming it. I've enjoyed having this bike, and I'll catch you all on the next one. Bye! Right, how do I get out? Oh no!